From Pocketnow.com, this is Pocketnow Weekly. Hello, and welcome to episode 005 of the Pocketnow Weekly, the once-a-week podcast from Pocketnow.com, where we discuss news and opinion from the world of mobile technology, smartphones, tablets, phablets, and everything in between. I'm your host, Michael Fisher, contributing editor at Pocketnow. Brandon Miniman is off today, so I'm joined by our managing editor, Anton D. Nagy. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Excellent. Good afternoon to you guys. I'm back to my normal schedule, coffee at 11 p.m.
Coffee at 11 at night. I'm going to print that on a T-shirt for you. And this week, we have a very special guest for today's podcast, Joe Levi, the Android guy. Joe, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to finally be here and not just be the sacrificial live tweeter.
You are the best live tweeter of any podcast. I mean, it's just so great. Every time, for listeners who do not follow us on Twitter, every time we do a podcast, Joe Levi is always there to listen to it the day it comes out. And we get about, what is it, about 50 or 60 tweets, Joe, within the span of about an hour and a half of Joe just picking out the most ridiculous, out-of-context quotes from our show.
Well, see, that's the best thing. In context, everything makes sense. But out of context, it's just hilarious.
Out of context, we're talking about honey on piles of excrement, as I recall.
Yeah.
Best line ever.
Before we get started and get into the stuff here, I just have a little state of the podcast update while we're talking about the show itself. Listeners, we're still working on expanding the podcast to as many different distro channels as possible. We've heard you on your requests for support for Stitcher and TuneIn. I've got requests submitted to both of those apps or companies or whatever you want to call them. We're working on that. But in the meantime, we're still on the site. And thanks to Joe, actually, we have a handy HTML5 player embedded in every post. We are on YouTube as well, on iTunes and Zune. And we announce new shows via Twitter, via Facebook, via Google+. So there's plenty of ways to grab the show while we continue to work out distribution.
Yeah, you have officially no reason not to listen.
Exactly. So Google is no longer supporting their Listen app, I guess. So that's weird. But we're still on... What's the story on that, Tony? We're still on their...
We still have the RSS feed. Yeah, it's live. And if you have another podcast application, a third-party podcast application, you can just subscribe to our RSS feed and you can listen just as with Google Play. So it's no biggie.
Good. All right. Well, that's good because I saw that news story go up and I was like, well, crap, we just got on there. And we are finally, there was a request by one or two users that we do timestamps, which would be really, really handy. Basically, if you're not familiar, you just click on a timestamp and you jump to a particular portion of the show, so that I think in the words of one commenter, iOS fans don't have to listen to an hour's worth of Android news or something like that. And I was like, well, come on, we have fun doing Android news.
Absolutely.
That's why Joe's here today.
Exactly.
It's not the easiest job. We kind of have to work that out, but we'll work out a way to make that happen. That's a pretty simple thing to get done. Before we hop into the show proper, any listeners who are not familiar with Joe himself, he is. There aren't many, by the way. Joe was specifically requested. He is so far, I think, from the comments I've read, the most requested presence on the podcast. So it's good to finally have him here. He's our Android guy on the site. In fact, he hosts a recurring program on Pocketnow called the Android Guy Weekly, which is full of a ton of useful content. I was just watching. Was today's episode, Joe? Was it today or yesterday's episode? The early adopter curse.
Oh, they all run together. I think that was today.
I think it was today. I can't tell the days apart anymore.
What day of the week is it today?
I don't even know.
That was today.
Tuesday? It's garbage day, so it must be Tuesday. Well, it's full. It's a great show. If you guys have not watched it, you should definitely tune into the Android Guy Weekly. I use it as a starting point. I've used it a couple times for the NFC articles, and I enjoyed the early adopter curse today because it spoke to a matter close to my heart. But we're honored to have you, Joe, as our first guest on the podcast. Briefly, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us how you became not Pocketnow's Android guy, but maybe that too. But how did you become an Android guy? How did you become a fanboy, for lack of a better term, of the platform?
Well, long story made very, very short. I was a Newton guy in the beginning, and went from there when Steve Jobs cut them off over to Windows Mobile, more because the company was supporting that. And I was Windows Mobile for many, many iterations. I even had the president of Casio Corporation send flowers to my wife when she was pregnant and went downtown Salt Lake to pick up a Cassiopeia when they screwed up an order.
Really?
Yeah. Fun story there. We'll cover that a different time. But after that, I could see the writing on the wall when iOS came out and the iPhone was ridiculously popular and really more intuitive than anything anyone had ever seen before. Mm-hmm. And I was still a little bit upset with Steve Jobs. So I decided to jump over to Android. Started out with the T-Mobile G1 and had it for about 10 minutes and flashed Jesus Freak on it. That was back before CyanogenMod. And I've just been there ever since.
Wow. At what point in its development was the G1 when you picked it up? Like, how late to the game did you come in?
I was about 6 to 8 months in after the initial release of the G1, which might sound like a lot in the whole scheme of things. You know, technology moves really fast. But remember that the G1 was not released into markets where T-Mobile didn't have 3G established. So it was very, very difficult to come by. Eventually, they changed that policy. So I was able to pick one up at my local Walmart. It cost me $100.
On a contract.
Way back
certainly.
in the day. Yeah, I actually went from a non-contract to a contract plan just so I could put it into the budget, and I since have gone back to non-contract.
I understand. I did that with the pre, so I get it. With the what did you have? Edge only in your market at that time?
Edge when I was lucky. GPRS.
Whoa.
GPRS was my standby.
Wow. Well, there you have it, listeners. Joe Levi's Android roots go all the way back to the G1. That's awesome. My first Android device was an Evo, the original Evo, so it was years into it before I finally succumbed to the Android impulse. It's great to talk to somebody who's been there from the start.
From the very beginning.
Yes. Speaking of software, Tony, I understand you got a rather significant firmware upgrade recently of the automotive variety. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I just want to mention it. Most probably many of our audience, guys listening and girls too, know about this. When you have a car, and especially a car which is made 2 or 3 years ago, a recent car, they are operated by a computer, and that computer behaves based on a software which is on a chip. And lo and behold, there are software updates. And there are new firmwares. So the interesting thing is that we all knew about this, but I never thought of it in the context in which I'm flashing my phones, but I can flash my car. So I was at the service today, and I was told that there is a new software update for my Chevy. And I said, okay, what does it, any changelog, bug fixes, improvements, performance? And they said, yeah, we might give it a try. And they flashed my computer, and I have some nice performance improvements. So I'm yet to find bugs, but I'm going to report them surely to Chevrolet.
That's really, really amazing. Do you know what? I mean, I know this is probably standard, but it's just so strange to think about. You know, I got an update for my car. Like I got a software update for my wheels. What is it running, Tony? Is it running like QNX, or is it?
I have
something?
absolutely no idea, but it's most probably running some proprietary software which is belonging to either the chip maker or the car maker. Here in Europe, and I'm sure in the US too, there are lots of tuning shops which offer custom firmware. Some chips can be flashed, some chips need to be replaced by a new chip with a new software. So I think these are most probably proprietary software.
Oh, it'll be interesting to hear. I mean, I remember RIM making such a big deal about how QNX was in everything. It was in, nuclear power plants and in automobiles and stuff like that. And I was like,
if only my Chevy had Clockwork Mod. And of the Touch variant.
Of course. Well,
now I've had a firmware upgrade on my car too.
What?
Not to steal Tony's thunder, but mine's a Toyota Prius.
On this fun. Oh, you have the Prius.
So my firmware update was to keep me from accelerating uncontrollably and smashing into things. And so far it's worked.
It has
never had that problem. So
Good. Yeah, listeners, right about 20 minutes before we started recording, Joe asked us to send him our positive thoughts so that he did not crash into anything on the drive to his recording site. And I was not aware, Joe, that was because your car may be running out of date software.
No, I'm updated. I'm good to go.
All right, good.
Michael, if I were you, I'd be afraid. I'm driving to Berlin and I'm picking you up at the airport, so you're going to experience firsthand this new software.
I am mildly terrified, and also I would like to. And now I feel like after that Berlin trip, if I survive it, I should go pay Joe a visit and see what it's like to ride in his Prius, and maybe compare and contrast the experiences.
And then make a special edition podcast.
Right? Yeah. No, I think that's guaranteed. Brandon will want to do a video. We should do that. All right, boys, let's jump into this here. We got the Android guy here. Let's not waste his time. Let's jump right into Android action here with the one of the more interesting stories, or one of the more boring stories of one of the more boring overall tales, I think, that is happening right now. Now, I am in the minority. I said this on Twitter before, and maybe it was a stupid thing to say, but I'm kind of bored to death by Apple v. Samsung. Largely because of stories like the one that came out earlier today, where it's like Apple's accusing Samsung of copying icon designs, or this was yesterday rather. And I mean, it's just, the story's great. It's Stephen Shank wrote it, but it's just, the testimony or the court documents are just page after page of screenshots of icons and comparing and deciding which ones are more or less similar to their Apple counterparts, and is this really copying? And I know this trial is really, really important, but it's stuff like this that really just kind of shuts me down, and I wonder how much of an impact the patent systems of various countries have on innovation. Guys, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, are you fascinated? Are you bored? Are you somewhere in between?
Interesting. I'm going to jump in because I'm going to finish quickly. I'm going to only refer to the legal side of things. What I don't understand is really the following thing. How on earth can you represent a phone if not with a phone? Or email if not with an envelope? Or contact if not with a person or a silhouette? Mm-hmm. So I think I'm not entirely at home with the U.S. patent system, but I think that some patents are granted very easily. That aside, Apple is capitalizing on this, and we all know that Apple has declared war on Samsung, just like the thermonuclear war on Android, and they're going to do everything in their power to lay down speed bumps in Samsung's way. Now, Samsung, on the other hand, is no longer defending themselves. Samsung is attacking back, and they've taken it to the second level. I think this thing will not stop, at least not in the near future. But I think this is bad for Apple, not that bad for Samsung, because Samsung is always is regarded as the underdog as far as these lawsuits are concerned. Apple has more to lose, but if they win, they have more to win on the short term. So it's a pretty tricky situation.
Joe, what about you?
I have to agree. When you're looking at a notepad, whether that's a legal pad sitting on your desk or whether that's an icon sitting on your phone or your tablet, it looks pretty much the same. It's representative of something that does the same thing. So I really wonder why Apple didn't pull in the legal pad manufacturers for violating their trademark, because I've got that and it's on my desk right now and I'm scribbling notes on it and it's ridiculous.
You might be subpoenaed soon.
Yeah, watch out.
This is going on the internet, isn't it?
Yeah.
All over it.
But there comes a point where you just have to say we've gone to every extent that we can to make these little pictures of things as self-explanatory, as international as possible, and really the icon speaks to what it is in the real world, and the real world was around long before the icon. The judge should look at this and just throw it out. One other side note, Tony, you mentioned how can you represent a phone without a picture of a phone?
Yeah.
Stop for just a minute and let's think, how old are most people who use cell phones these days?
Mm-hmm.
Have they even seen a handset like that? Do they even know what that is? Or are they used to these little bricks that we carry around in our pockets.
Good point.
That is a really good point. I read a story, or I read an editorial, maybe it was from us, about that very thing somewhat recently, and it's like, yeah, that telephone receiver that's on every dialer button almost ever is, it's got to be just this abstract construct to a lot of kids these days, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they've never held this like Bakelite, 4-pound receiver with a coiled cord in their hands. As a matter of fact, I would like to hear. I would just like to say it right now because we get some listener mail, but I want to get some more. If you are, if you're a young listener, please write in and let us know if you've like never encountered an analog phone receiver and at some point in your life wondered what that was on the phone button and somebody had to tell you. Let us know.
Hey, pulse dialing before
Pulse
tone dialing. Oh, yeah.
Yes, rotary dial.
Big rotary dials.
That's what I would do. Isn't there an app? Wasn't there an app on some platform that let you do that? Like it was a rotary dial app?
Guess what? It was iOS.
Of course it was iOS.
Quick question, guys.
Yeah.
If you were to have one of those Stone Age phones in front of you and it was ringing, what hand would you use to pick it up, left or right?
Right.
So then why is every icon represented as I was to pick it up with my left hand? iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. Why just can't they invert it and mirror it? You see?
Well, I'm picking the phone up with my left hand. That way I have my right hand free to take notes.
Very crafty, Levi.
Nice.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, just make sure you take your notes on a pad that doesn't look anything like the 12 that are on my screen right now. Let's move on. There's more Samsung stuff to talk about. This we have a quad-core Galaxy Note 10.1 tablet coming out from Samsung. This is a pretty new story. We're kind of prepping for maybe what might be the launch event later this month. Not really sure. Maybe on August 15th. Joe, please take it away. I'm so Nexus 7. I'm still kind of in the honeymoon phase with that tablet that I'm just so bored by this. Now, don't get me wrong, please. I think this could be a really cool device. It's just that I can't find a way to phrase it right now that'll be anything but a spec list. So what do you think about this, Joe?
Well, first and foremost, it's getting headlines because it's quad core. And what we learned from the Galaxy S3 is quad core really doesn't matter in practical use.
And the
high-end
1X
gaming,
too.
sure. Exactly. What really, really helps is more RAM. Now, this tablet is reportedly going to have 2 gig of RAM, so that should be good. It'll be interesting to see if we get any kind of a performance increase by having quad-core with the extra RAM, or if it's just essentially the same thing. Do we know what kind of processor is going to be in that? Is it
Probably an Exynos.
Probably an Exynos, right? Yeah. Samsung combined. That's the Galaxy S3. It's not called out in the story, but yeah, I would agree with Tony. That's probably going to be an Exynos in there.
You know, guys, what's lame? And I'm going to be the black sheep again. It's lame regardless if Samsung is doing it or somebody else. But in this current case, we're looking at Samsung. It is lame to announce and to show off the Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1 in February at the MWC, and in August to still not have it on the shelves, but to have announcements regarding specifications which are changing. Now that is lame.
That is lame. I agree. What do you think is the source of that delay? Do you think it was a tactical maneuver, or was
No, I think they jumped in. They were quick because there were absolutely no tablets from Samsung at MWC. We had the Galaxy Tab 10.1 last year, but of course there was the 7.7, which is lame too. And I think they kind of jumped the gun a little bit. They wanted to be out there together with the Acer and the Asus and the Pad phone, and they wanted to show something off that Samsung is continuing to do tablets, and they bring this S Pen to the tablet because it's a bigger screen. It's normal for you to use it on a bigger screen than on your phablet. But I think they realized that by the time this will get out, it will become stale specs-wise. So they said, let's just cancel this or postpone it, put in some more specifications, raw horsepower, and delay it a little bit, which is good, but come on, guys, 6 months, that's too much.
Yeah, and actually you bring up an interesting point from a branding perspective. That's kind of one of the only things I find interesting about this device so far, because I don't know a lot about it, because none of us do. But I find it
I had a hands-on with it.
You did?
I had a hands-on in February in Barcelona.
That's right, in Barcelona. That's right.
Yeah, but it was with the initial specifications,
Right.
which
That's what I mean. In the new device,
yeah.
we don't have. Yeah.
The new one, no.
No, but I think the branding is the most interesting part about it, because here's what Samsung has come out and they've been like, here's the Galaxy Note. Boom, this is a phablet. This is a whole new category, blah. And then the Note, like, for better or worse, picks up a whole lot of press, and people know what the Galaxy Note is because Samsung has been just pushing it down people's throats with advertising. And so that Galaxy Note brand is pretty strong. And then they just kind of append it to a tablet they were probably going to build anyway. Where they're like, here's the Galaxy Note 10.1. And so, yeah, their brand message sort of goes out the window where it's like, is it a phone? Is it a tablet? It's Galaxy Note. Whereas this one is like, no, it's a tablet, and it's also Galaxy Note. But I find that interesting. Like, and you know what? It works on me, too. Because I sit here and I kind of soul search for a second, and I'm like, yeah, I'm more likely to buy this device because it has the Galaxy Note branding. Not because I like styluses, not because I really care about the initial Note too much, but because the Galaxy Note branding I find superior to the Galaxy Tab branding. Just in my head, it's just, because the Galaxy Tabs have never been terribly impressive. So, I don't know. Am I alone in that? Am I weird?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, thanks.
You're absolutely weird.
Thank you.
I'm reminded of the early days of Apple, and going back to my Newton roots again. Apple came out with their laptop computer, and they called it a notebook because it was analogous to a notebook that you would tote around with you. When Newton came out, it was a message pad. It was essentially a flip notepad. So they had some very strong branding around the sizes of screens. Saturday Night Live picked up on it, and they did a Chris Farley skit with the Apple Post-it, which was Newton powered, and you wrote on it and converted your handwriting to text. And when you were done with that note, you just threw it away. But I think that you're right with the concept that you need to brand something based on the size if you're going to go that route, and then stick with it and come up with another brand for something in a different size. Some of us out here are confused. Is 10.1 the size of the screen, or is that the version of the device? Because, man, that means they're like 7 ahead of the iPad.
Right. Well, then it must be better.
7.1 ahead.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I think that if August 15th is indeed the launch, or the announcement date on that, or the official unveiling, or whatever you want to call it, well, there's some kind of event happening in New York City on that date, and as it looks right now, it looks like we're going to be there to cover it, and it might be me, I don't know.
By the way,
yeah,
Samsung, if everything goes according to plan and according to our speculation, will have 2 Notes on display in Berlin, the Note 2 and the Note 10.1. How about that?
Well, that'll be a nice little duo. We'll have Samsung TouchWiz Nature UX on 2 size screens. Question. Yeah.
Will these be the only 2 new devices at Samsung, or will they be something else? Maybe a Windows Phone, maybe a Windows Phone 8, an early announcement, something, a sneak peek?
That would be awesome. I would love that, because we talked about that last week, right? About the rumored Samsung Windows Phone devices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be. I don't know. Selfishly, I'm hoping for that because I would be much more interested. Not that I'm not interested in the Note 2. I'm interested in the Note 2 as well. But I'd like to see some more from Samsung. But I want to keep moving here because Android is still has a little bit of news here. I have this sad thing. HTC not doing well financially. I don't know much about finances. We've established this on previous podcasts. But HTC has really taken a beating in the marketplace as a result of some lower than projected earnings, I think is the core of that. And we had our own Jaime Rivera posted a really interesting editorial called HTC is sinking. They need more than just innovation. And he kind of drew some parallels there between HTC and Nokia and Palm to a degree. So I'm interested to see. Like, I read this editorial about a half hour ago, and I'm fascinated by it because I don't perceive HTC as being in quite as hot water as some of the other beleaguered companies in the landscape. But what do you guys think? Do you think HTC is in serious trouble, or is this just something that'll blow over once as the One and its follow-on products to get traction?
It's a stage. I think it's a stage, and it will pass. And yeah, we don't know about numbers, but I can tell you this much. Stocks, usually when it comes to huge companies like these, tend to react to even the smallest rumor, the smallest number which is officially published by the company, and they are very sensitive. Now, if you look at HTC's lineup for this year, the one lineup, the S, the V, and the other one, slipping my mind right now.
Yeah, I can never remember the other one either.
Yeah, it's a good lineup. The phones are good. The problem HTC has is called Samsung. And this is their main problem because Samsung has managed not only to become the number one Android OEM, but it's doing it with great success.
The number one handset vendor in the world, let alone Android.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can go into a discussion about Samsung versus Apple because Apple only has like 3 or 4 devices at any time on the market, and Samsung has a truckload, so let's not get into that. But comparing Samsung to HTC, they have managed to turn the situation in their favor. And well, the HTC One X was their flagship in Barcelona, but in the backstage, people were just talking, why is Samsung missing MWC? Where is the Galaxy S3? I mean, they built up that anticipation, and yeah, hardcore fans bought the HTC One X, which is a good phone except for its camera. And I'm going to say this until I drop.
I like that camera.
But I think that HTC is now in a lowest position, and they will start climbing real fast because I'm expecting some follow-ups to the One X at IFA with faster processor, still Tegra-free, software updates, Jelly Bean if possible, and they will get back on track.
I was hoping to see some more rumors on HTC's presence coming up at IFA, but I only saw because kind of this one iteration of the V in the news feed, and I was like, well, that's really boring. I hope we see more.
We still have 2 weeks.
I know. Yeah, that's true. I just want more leaks. But Joe, what do you think? Do you think the problem is also Samsung?
HTC has a really, really firm foundation, but they didn't come from the same fold that Samsung came from. If you look back in HTC's history, even back before Android, you had HTC making devices for various OEMs, which was kind of unusual. You had stuff that was coming out from Compaq and from HP that were designed and built by HTC.
True.
They had their own brand, yeah.
Exactly. XDA from XDA developers. The XDA is an HTC device. The G1 made by HTC. The Nexus one made by HTC.
The Trio 800, right? As well?
Yeah. They make fabulous, fabulous hardware. Where I think they're going through some growing pains right now is they've got to be innovative and keep that quality hardware, and it's the innovation that is new to them. We've seen some huge leaps, but Samsung was able to ramp up and come out with stuff a little bit faster than them. That's because Samsung's been in everything. They've been in consumer electronics across the board and can apply that experience to their smartphones, to their tablets, to their in-betweens all along. So don't count HTC out just yet. They're not doing as well as I personally would like them to be. I used to be an HTC guy exclusively. I skipped the Nexus S because it wasn't HTC. But you just wait, give them some time. They're going to come back and they're going to wow you.
And an important factor we have here, and I'm going to let now Brandon speak through my voice. He's always about marketing, and he's right. Samsung burned a truckload of cash in marketing campaigns. Let it be the Note, the S3, or any other product worldwide. I think if HTC would be more attentive and paying attention to marketing, when is the last time you guys saw an HTC One X ad? And compare that to the last time you've seen a Galaxy S3 ad.
I don't know if I've ever seen an HTC One X ad except for on TV. I've seen no print stuff. Yeah.
So I think marketing is also required for your products to get a push, to get a recognition on the market. And it's that competitive advantage which Samsung currently has over HTC.
Yeah.
Well, just look at their tagline. It says quietly innovative. And
they're
right
quiet,
now they're being too
brilliant.
quiet.
Quietly brilliant. Yeah. I agree. No, it is founded in marketing, and I really hope it's interesting that HTC's big problem is Samsung, because Samsung really did come in and just suck all the air out of the room after the after the One series landed, but most notably the One X. And I'm with you, Joe. I mean, emotionally speaking, I want to make it clear that I give all hardware a fair shake, and I'm pretty good at being fair. But emotionally, I had a lot invested in HTC after my time with the One X. I loved that device a lot more than I thought I was going to. And so when Samsung dropped the Galaxy S3 news and I kind of saw the hardware wasn't to my tastes quite as much, I was like, well, this isn't going to be too big a deal. And then I really got to thinking about it. I'm like, no, you're an idiot. Samsung's going to come carpet bomb this place, and they did. And so I agree with you guys. It'll be really nice to see where HTC goes from here, and I hope they continue the trend of innovation they started at the beginning of this year with the One series. And I know they've learned their lesson, and from 2011 making just 12 different iterations of the same boring concept over and over again. I know they've said as much that they're not going to do that.
Believe it or not, aside from the users needing HTC to succeed, Samsung is also needing HTC to succeed because they are driving competition, and nobody wants Samsung or HTC, for that matter, to become sloppy. So I think they need to be one step ahead of each other, depending on what time of the year you look at the market.
Agreed. Yeah, they'll leapfrog. Absolutely.
Yeah. Moving ahead, I just published a piece yesterday called "A Week Without a Keyboard."
Oh, those emails!
Yeah, Tony and Joe and everybody on the team actually got to see the emails that resulted from this experiment of mine. For anybody who didn't read the editorial, you should do so. I would appreciate it. It's a longer one than usual, but there's some funny screenshots of me cursing at the phone in there. And basically, what happened was Brandon posed this idea, which was a really cool idea. He was just very simple. Like, what if all you had for input was voice input, was speech dictation, was voice to text, and you couldn't use your keyboard at all? And I kind of instantly latched onto this idea, and I was like, I'll do it. Can I do it? And so I did it. I did it for about 6 days. I wanted to do it for a full week, and I frankly just could not last. I had learned everything I thought I might learn by day 6, and I was like, no, you know what? Forget it. I'm ending this early because I'm so frustrated because this has made me hate text messaging, and I love text messaging, and it's made me hate composing emails on the fly, and I love doing that too. It made me hate everything about the phone. Which was a profound surprise to me because I have had, before then, I had nothing but great things to say about
Michael,
Google's
did you limit yourself to Android only or other platforms?
Yeah.
So only Android?
I was just getting into that. Like, I was only Android. As a matter of fact, we have that on the headline here because I wanted to try all the platforms, and then I was like, no, you know what? I don't use an iPhone as my daily driver, so if I wanted to try this, I would have to carry my iPad around everywhere, and I didn't want to do that. So there may be future installments of this experiment with different platforms. I would like that. So I guess my question, in order to kind of translate this to you guys, like, what has your experience been with voice dictation on your daily drivers? Because before this experiment, mine was so great. When I used Google, I keep wanting to call it Google Voice, Google's speech-to-text engine, because it doesn't have a name, right, Joe? It has no name, the Google's voice stuff,
Speech.
Right? It's
just speech.
Speech. They need to name that thing Majel. Are you with me on that, Joe, specifically?
I have to agree with homage to the late Roddenberrys, yes.
The first lady of Star Trek, yes.
Absolutely.
Would be wonderful. But maybe the Roddenberry estate made a stink, I don't know. At any rate, I loved Google's voice tools before this experiment. When I used them in a manner not intended, I did not like them anymore, and that shouldn't be a surprise, but it was. Joe, how do you feel about it?
Well, were you using ice cream sandwich or were you using Jelly Bean?
I was using both. I was using my Nexus 7 and my Galaxy S3, so I was using both of them intermittently, and I didn't notice too big a difference between them, to be honest with you.
Now, the biggest difference that I've noticed, accuracy is about the same, which really is impressive. The way things used to work on Ice Cream Sandwich, essentially your Android would record your voice and it would stream it up to Google servers, and then you would have the entire weight of the Google Cloud behind you to recognize your voice and send back the translation. Mm-hmm. Now on Jelly Bean, they've been able to compress that and do that on the device, which is just tremendously impressive. The main thing that I noticed in using Ice Cream Sandwich versus Jelly Bean was there were times when I would speak whatever I wanted, and all of that was gone when, oh, sorry, we couldn't get a reliable network connection. Try again. And now I had to talk it all over again. Yep. So now with it being offline in Jelly Bean, it works great. Now I don't use it for all of my input, but especially for voice commands, to use a term from Windows Mobile, use it all the time. Send a quick text message. Absolutely. I will tell my Android I want to send a text message to Michael Fisher. I'm going to be home as soon as I can, so you can start the podcast on time. And great. And one key press later, and it sends it, and it's almost perfect. But that's me.
Yeah, no, and
everybody's voice is different.
Well, that's that's me too. When I'm using it, when I'm not using it 24 hours a day, or when I'm not using it for all my input every day, I should say. What about you, Tony?
Well, I'm not a native speaker, and everybody who has ears and who listens to this podcast immediately recognizes that I have a European accent. Some might say it's Russian, regardless.
What are you talking about?
I don't have the pronunciation is not correct sometimes, and the accents I'm using are not correct. And still, I managed to send emails using my voice at a fairly 95, 97 success rate. But of course, I'm not using Android as my daily driver. I'm using iOS. Now, this might come down to Siri, or it might come down to that stupid saying we have around here that you are speaking a too pure English for them to understand, for the services to understand. Maybe, who knows?
You think you're being overly, your diction is overly good? You sometimes.
I'm striving to pronounce every word right, even though they don't come out right. But somehow the system seems to understand.
Yeah,
and
really
maybe because English is your main language, you're speaking faster than I do at a faster pace, and you sometimes tend to eat vowels and shorten words, and maybe that's a problem.
Well, I think it's the other way. I think I have the same problem as you, Tony, to be honest with you, because I speak when I speak to my phone, I do change it up a little bit. I find that when I am this conversational, when I'm speaking like I'm speaking to you right now, it's better. Like it somehow they've tweaked it so that conversationally, at least for me, it picks up a lot better at this
then just
speed.
Keep it natural.
Yeah, and it's hard to do. I don't know. I did it for 6 days. I kind of fried my brain doing it. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm done. But
speaking to a computer is a very unnatural thing. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to say it because it's a computer. For all these years, we've just used either punch cards in the early days or keyboards and mice. Right. But now to use your voice, how do I talk to this thing that I've used for so long?
Right. But
carrying that over to mobile phones, it's the same thing. It's just awkward.
It is, but it's funny because these, as I said in the editorial, these things consistently fool us. Like a lot of people go through life thinking that that computers and mobile phones and technology itself is much more intelligent than it actually is, because that's the impression they get, right? I mean, this stuff looks tremendously advanced, and it is, but at its core, it's just a decision machine, right? It's just making 100,000 decisions a second between yes and no. And until actual artificial intelligence surfaces, there are going to be real hard limits to things like voice interface. And that's why in 10 years, voice interface, while it has evolved a whole lot, it would be my argument that if you asked me back in 2002, I would probably think that we would be further along by now.
That's creepy. I don't want a phone which would look like the PureView with a huge bump at its back and inside there a small piece of brain inside of a fishbowl. That driving my phone is just super, super spooky.
That I've never envisioned a situation like that, and
now you do.
And now I have nightmare fuel. Thank you.
Exactly.
As long as we have Asimov's 3 rules of robotics built into our smartphones, we'll be just fine.
Good point. All right, let's move on. I'm really creeped out by that image, Tony. Thank you. The brain tissue fueled PureView. Finally, the last kind of Android topic. Joe wrote an editorial with a wonderful header image that I liked a lot of 2 roads diverging in a wood. About
it's a symmetry.
What?
It's a cemetery.
Thank you, Tony. Somebody saw it.
Oh crap! Did I miss the point? Am I an idiot? What happened?
Yeah, it's regardless which way you go, you die.
Oh, wow!
That's not what I meant, Tony.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
That is.
I looked at so many pictures. On one side was the cemetery. On the other side was kind of this nice little wooded area that you could walk down and have a nice day.
Okay, so we have officially a creepy podcast.
We do.
Very
We've moved it. Oh, now I see what
Halloween
you mean.
edition.
Yeah. Well, no, they're both cemetery roads. There's just one of them is in Sun and one is sort of not in Sun.
This is the way I envisioned it. I mean, regardless of which you choose, you're still gonna sink. Not
That's
to say die again.
Very, very morbid. Listeners, if you want to follow along with us, follow the link in the podcast. Or it's Should RIM Have Gone with Android is the name of the editorial. Probably a lot less creepy than it has just become on the podcast. Yeah. Joe, fill us in here. Give us your stance, and tell us what this is based on.
All right. So, spoiler alert. Yes, RIM should have gone with Android. So now I guess you don't have to read the article, but there's a lot of reasons behind that. And the article was more open-ended than that. It was where were they and what were they doing and how did they get to where they are now? And then we left the question open for our readers to decide, should RIM really have gone with Android? And the reason being is just looking at making an operating system alone, let alone hardware and an interface, those are all very, very large tasks. And RIM was not a really big company, but they took the world by storm with push email primarily. Mm-hmm. Something that I kind of shook my head at because I had that with Windows Mobile. But anyway.
Push email with Windows Mobile?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. Okay. There's that qualifier we were looking for.
It came along. But, I could get email every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, whenever it went to check. But RIM had to work on not only their operating system, but they had their communication layer, which started out kind of just as email, but then got into some instant messaging with BlackBerry Messenger and whatnot. They had their OS or the UI to the OS that they had to work on, and then they had the hardware as well. And they did pretty good at all of that. I think they did better at the hardware than anything else, but they got stuck in the mire with, again, trying to keep up, trying to be relevant, and their operating system was holding them back. So should they have dumped their core OS and gone with Android? And my argument is yes, absolutely. We look at everything right now that's running on Android, and I'm not just talking smartphones. Everybody has their vendor overlay, their skin. HTC's got theirs, Samsung's got theirs, LG's got theirs. I hate them, but everybody's got them, and they can customize as much as they want. So, now we've got all this. We also have ebook readers that are running on Android, but you can't tell they're Android. The Nook and the Kindle Fire, they don't look like Androids, but they are. RIM could have done that and made their own nice hardware, their own nice UI, and just relied on Android as the underlying OS to power it all.
So that, like, you think RIM should have gone with a custom fork of Android in much earlier in the process?
At the very least.
Yeah.
They could also have just done what everybody else is doing and become essentially just a hardware manufacturer like Samsung, like HTC. The model works, and we could have had an awful lot of cool things brought to the Android environment that were learned from RIM, and RIM could have learned from everyone else as well. And because it's all based on the same platform, it's very easy to make those things work in some other architecture, some other infrastructure.
It would have been very nice to see RIM hardware paired with an OS that turned out to have a lot more future than the OS that shipped on a lot of that RIM hardware. I agree. And actually, that's something I want to come back to toward the end of the podcast here. So I want to kind of leave that there for now. RIM doesn't get a lot of exposure on Pocketnow, and I think once it becomes in the news it does, but I think once it becomes a lot more relevant or a lot less relevant, suddenly, it'll, I would really like to kind of delve into the story of RIM a little bit more, and I really hope they last. I don't think they're going to. But let's kind of move on. Before we leap out of Android here, Joe, you're our guest. You're a special guest. Do you have? Is there anything we missed before we hop over to Windows Phone?
The only thing that I have to bring up is a really neat patent application. And yes, I know patent is a 4-letter word.
How about a good story about a bridge?
Well, Google presented this patent application to use what looks like their Glass platform to track eye movements and let you do things with eye motions. And in the patent, it was specifically called out to unlock it. Imagine slide to unlock with your eyeballs. Oh. There you go, Tony.
Yeah.
Live tweet
Tony's
that one.
Got to be freaking
out. But we saw that in the patent application. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's something that's right in front of your eyeball. You've got this little teeny screen looking at your eye all day long. I can only imagine Samsung's looking at that and salivating because, hey, they've got that
Smart
Stay Awake feature.
Smart Stay,
exactly.
Yeah, that would be like Smart Stay on steroids. I mean, that would be amazing, and you could solve
Here's the crap out of me.
You don't want.
Can you imagine unlocking your phone with an eye pattern? So you don't have to touch the screen. You don't have to worry about somebody fooling the face recognition by putting a picture of you in front of it. You can just do some funky dance with your eyeballs, and then everyone who's next to you thinks you're having a seizure, but your phone is unlocked, just like that.
If we continue at this rate, the phone's going to unlock us.
Ooh, profundity.
Yeah.
Well, did that patent get granted, or was that just an application?
From what I read, it was just an application.
Okay. Well, that's...
I may be wrong.
You know, and it's not surprising considering all the developments with Google glasses or whatever the hell that... Wait, what do they call that? Glass? The
Yes.
eyewear stuff? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm completely not tuned in with that. I really would like to see more about that. But that's awesome. I did not know about that. I will have to look that up. Let's hop into Windows Phone real quick here. We have 2 news articles out of Nokia, which always makes me happy because we kind of always talk about Nokia hardware on the podcast, and we don't need to do it for too long this time around. But Nokia is rumored to be set to announce their first Windows Phone 8 devices at Nokia World this year. Tony, you wrote this story. Do you? It's a short one, but this is from Bloomberg, yeah?
Yeah, indeed, and I'm not sure if it will happen. Probably we will see something like, here's an early prototype, and from what I think, Adam had a news post according to which Microsoft was going to allegedly show off some of Windows Phone 8's consumer-oriented features at that certain Nokia developer event in September 3/5, if I'm recalling this right. So I think we will not see a new Nokia consumer-oriented phone, but we'll see some Nokia prototype which is used to show off some Windows Phone 8s. However, if I will be wrong and Nokia will indeed announce a Lumia, call it whatever you want, hopefully a peer review one, then I will still say it's lame when we will record a podcast in December that Stephen Elop will show off a device at the beginning of September on stage, and it will only available in time for the holiday season. So I really don't want there to be any misunderstanding. Stephen Elop said it himself that they want to reduce the period of time between an official announcement and the official availability of hardware because it's good for the business.
Right.
By the time you release something to the market 3 months away, it's no longer buzzworthy. So mixed thoughts here. I don't know what to say yet.
And we've also got this other rumor, which goes hand in hand with this one, about Nokia's first Windows Phone 8 phone. This is a photo that comes to us from BGR, and who got it from WP Dang, I guess. What's the story here? I mean, this looks like a Lumia 900 to me.
Lumia 800 all day long.
Yeah? Oh, it's an 800, you think?
Yeah, I think it's an 800. It's an 800. Yeah.
It looks a little wide to be an 800 to me, but I guess, it could be. Like, it has the old, I commented on the piece when it went up, that it has the old Windows Phone logo as a home screen.
Yes, indeed.
Button, and it's like, well, that's kind of a dead giveaway right there, isn't it? But
I really hope it's not going to be the official Nokia Windows Phone 8 because people don't get me wrong, do love the Nokia N9, the Lumia 800, and the Lumia 900 design, but it's getting old, and nobody wants Nokia to pull an iPhone 4S.
Oh, God, no. And Nokia can't afford. I think the only people that can afford to do that are Apple and to a smaller extent, Samsung. I mean, yeah, nobody wants to pull an iPhone 4S. I got excited when I first saw the story. I hopped onto the post. I saw the photos, and I was like, well, that's exactly what we have now. So I feel like that's probably a device running 7.8. But at any rate, it'll be fun to see what Nokia brings. I would like to see also, by the time this becomes relevant, maybe we'll have some more Nokia sales numbers. I may be jumping the gun on that a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see what the Lumia sales have done this past quarter.
I hope I'm not right. I remember two podcasts away, I said that they will somehow fall. Just a quick note, I think you're right. This is the Lumia 900, not the 800. I'm looking at the picture right now.
Yeah, it just looks a little wide. But anyway, well, we'll see. There'll be plenty of time to discuss that. It's just I wanted to cover these because it's always exciting to hear Windows Phone 8 and Nokia in the same sentence, or Windows Phone 8 and any hardware manufacturer in the same sentence, because it'll be really nice to see that when it finally comes to pass. So, at any rate, and finally, in another slow week in Windows Phone news, so the last piece is the Microsoft backing away from the Metro name. Guys, the only piece that I found is a little bit old. It's dated by a couple of days. What have we gotten to the bottom of this? Is it who's filing a claim?
Let me.
Yeah,
I live in Europe. I live in Europe. You guys live in the States, and you don't know this because that super popular chain is not in the States. So here in Europe, we have a company which is called Metro AG. It's from Germany, and it's a discounter. It has thousands of shops across Europe, and they are using the Metro name as their shops. You will see plenty of those in Berlin. So I think they filed against the Metro UI because the Metro moniker is trademarked to them. And I know this because I worked in the field 6 years ago. In Poland, for instance, Metro goes by the name of Makro exactly because of some intellectual property rights. So to answer your question, there's retailer discounter chain here in Europe who is using the Metro name not only to describe the shops but also for the company, and they filed against the Metro UI.
Wow.
But did you hear the new name or the rumored new name?
Windows 8 style UI?
Yes.
That's ridiculous. Microsoft looks like they're spinning this as like, well, we used Metro as a code name during development, and now we're switching to the brand name. I don't buy that for a second, really. Metro is, first of all, a cool brand name for a UI. Second of all, is probably what they should have called Windows Phone 7.
Why didn't they go with Metropolitan Interface or something like that?
Well,
because Metro stands for that.
Yeah, because Metro is like shorter and it's cleaner and it's hipper. Like I like Metro. I really think they should have named their mobile platform Metro instead of Windows, because Windows carries a lot of baggage with it. But wow. A company. Go ahead. Is that Joe?
Yeah. So I was just thinking. I've heard the same thing about Metro AG, and as I understand it, like Tony said, they're kind of a discounter. So I wonder if it's not so much that Metro was upset with Microsoft using part of their name, which I do think was just the code name that got carried over into the real world. I'm wondering if Microsoft wasn't thinking, crap, these are a discounter. That means we're running Windows with a discounted, cheap user interface, and they wanted to distance themselves from that type of thing. I think it has more to do with where Tony was going, especially because Microsoft is seeing what the legal landscape is in Germany, particularly. Yeah. They can get shut down over there in a heartbeat, and probably would. Right. But I don't know if Microsoft might just have done that. I still wonder why they didn't call it Tiles or Live Tiles, because that's what they are.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of on the nose for like a branding perspective, right? But I don't know. I mean, we could talk about that. But I find it, if that is the case, if this discount chain, as big as it is, has actually kind of instituted this and is at the core of this, I find that incredibly infuriating because, I don't know, Tony, you can stop me on this because you have more legal background than I do, but I feel like the only basis for a copyright claim on this is like likelihood of confusion. And I'm never likely to confuse a UI layer that's not ever been advertised with a Stop and Shop.
Well, you are partially right, but when you trademark something, whether it's in whether it's in the international trade, how should I say this, administration, something like that in Paris or in Switzerland, because we have two here in Europe, or it is in the States, you are trademarking a name which speaks for a brand. But that name, that arrangement of letters is what is trademarked, not the product which is behind that. So it's the word metro, which is trademarked.
Well, there you go.
Over here in the States, we have two different laws that apply. One, we have trademark infringement, where you are using somebody else's trademarked name. And usually that doesn't have to be a registered trademark, but it carries more bearing if you have. That's the little circle R that you see after names. Otherwise, it's just a little TM that you see. That's definitely a no-no, but it's only when the mark that you're using is in the same industry and has a potential to cause confusion. Because of that, some companies got together and said, we don't like that, we don't think it's strong enough. And not long ago, we passed what's called a trademark dilution law, where your trademark might be diluted. So far, there's only been one case that's ever been tried against it, and it failed. And I bring that up because it's close to home. The local circus, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, has the slogan of the greatest show on earth. That's their tagline. Well, Utah, where I am right now, has a slogan, the greatest snow on earth, because we're in the desert and we have great, nice powder, and everyone comes from around the world to ski the slopes out here. Well, they sued the state to try and get rid of it under the trademark dilution, because that could cause confusion because it's show versus snow. And the judge looked at that and said, no, this isn't going to cause confusion at all. So it's the only case that's ever been tried against that law, to the best of my knowledge, and they didn't win it anyway.
Wow.
So in the States, Metro versus Metro AG wouldn't have any ground. I think Microsoft is just being nice to their friends in Germany.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of all this is that before I came to Pocketnow, I spent 4 years doing books on tape for law students as a voiceover guy. And you guys have completely schooled me. Thank you. You're bringing back memories, though, all this trademark dilution stuff and, likelihood of confusion. And yeah. I'm asleep. Okay, iOS. But thank you seriously for your insight. That is interesting stuff. Next time I want to talk about the Transformer, the Hasbro Transformer stuff. That's all.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, iOS. It's basically all but confirmed that this new iPhone is going to have this taller display that we've been seeing, right? So we've got this news story that's an iOS simulator. I guess it's the emulator, is it? Revealing UI changes for a new, taller iPhone 5 display. Is anybody surprised by this? I mean, like we're all kind of sold on this new design leak, right? Unless we're all getting the wool pulled over our eyes.
Well, I still think that what we've seen, the leaks, the pictures, the so-called devices captured on camera, are far from the real deal. I will eat my words live here on the podcast if I turn out to be wrong, but the widescreen is slowly but surely becoming a reality, and there's really no other way of pulling this off for Apple but to increase only the height resolution. So going from 960 to 11, how much is it? 1136. Because all iOS has the most applications in the App Store. So the iTunes wins hands down, even though Android is close. Now imagine all of the developers having a need or being required to recode their applications in order to support a new resolution just a couple of months after the Retina display came out. And that was also a big speed bump because initially some of the applications were just blowing and inflating up graphics and text, and they were blurry. I think that this is the best solution Apple could come up with because all of those applications will work. The horizontal resolution remains the same, and even, I touched on this on the last podcast. Even if there will be some black strips at the top or the bottom or both for the first week or two, I think it will serve as a stable basis from which they could start building and adding to the code.
I agree.
And not rebuilding.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I may have mentioned this on the last podcast, I don't remember, but the Droid Incredible 4G LTE, which I reviewed recently, has a sort of a similar display shape as this kind of hypothesized one. And that device felt great in my hand. A tall, narrow device, I think, will probably resonate with a fair amount of people. So it'll be sort of interesting to see how this takes hold if it does. But I agree. We're not going to see too much slowdown on development there. But
you know what I'm doing right now?
What?
I'm holding my iPhone 4S in my right hand, and I'm reaching with my thumb all the way to the top left corner, and I can easily tap that.
It's so great.
Now, if it becomes taller, and we'll have not a 3.5-inch diagonal screen, but a 4.0, 4.1, I will not be able to do that, and Apple will kill one-handed usability.
But I mean, I don't think they have a choice right now. I just finished a piece today about whether the new iPhone Mini is going to be here, and it's already here. Like the iPhone 4.
Beautiful piece, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, the iPhone 4 is the iPhone Mini. Apple can no longer stick around at this 3.5-inch display resolution. Display size, and they need to grow, and they're going to grow. And
I agree.
And of course, but they're going to kill one-handed usability. I hate that. They don't have a choice. There needs to be another revolution in form factor design that brings that back, and it's something.
Why don't they just kill the home button?
What, kill the home button? Oh yeah, I agree. I wrote a piece on that like months ago. I think
that
the home button should go. When the Galaxy S3 launched with it, I was livid.
That's not a home button. That's an action button. That's what it looks like. That's what it should do.
Ooh, and can you define action button really quickly, Joe?
Sure. Look at your old original Androids. You had a D-pad, an up, down, left, right, and in the middle was an action button. It let you essentially press Enter or select OK.
Yes.
Look back to Windows Mobile. You had the same thing. You push down on that D-pad, and that was OK. That's what that button is. That's what that button should do. It shouldn't take you back home on Samsung or on Apple. That should be whatever the default action of this page is, that's the button that executes it.
That's an interesting perspective. Have you written a piece on that yet?
I covered it somewhat in depth with my Galaxy S3 Verizon edition
Verizon review.
Yeah, I think that justifies having a nice little rant over on Pocketnow.
Doesn't it?
That button should just do what the page is supposed to do. Make it so.
Make it so. Well, it's there are no buttons on the iPad Mini, from what we can see. And with that incredibly smooth segue, I will ask you guys briefly, very briefly, because this is not a new thing at all. What do you think about this? There's always every week there's a new iPad 7 rumor, and there's going to be one until it's either confirmed or completely shot down officially by Apple. So we're kind of used to these rumors, but the interesting part about the most recent rumor is that the iPad 7 back case, if it is a real one, Tony, this is the leak that's not a fake, right? That we don't think is a fake?
We don't think, but we cannot confirm it.
We can't confirm it, but it doesn't have a camera hole from what we can see. So there may not be a camera on the iPad Mini if an iPad Mini exists. We have all sorts of opinion on our site about whether that is a good or a bad thing. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast. So that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is this information. What is it? An email, Tony. Take it away. What happened here with Steve Jobs?
Well, there was a case, the Samsung versus Apple case, and if I recall well, Mr. Eddie Q was showed an email, and long story short, the email chain which was presented in the trial made references to Steve Jobs in the end not being that much against of a 7-inch form factor, which really rattled my world, because everything I've heard about Steve Jobs and I've read and I've seen him talk and think just implied the opposite. He was determined and he was convinced that the only real form factor for a tablet is the 9.7 inch, or let's round it up to 10 inch form factor, 4:3 aspect ratio. And there were also legends built on this that Steve Jobs will never allow Apple to go with an iPad mini. And this was also one of my reasons on previous podcasts of thinking that this might not be true. Now, hearing this in an official court presented as evidence that, let me just try to see the quote here.
I've got that if you want me to read
please.
Q said, having used a Samsung Galaxy Tab, I tend to agree with many of the comments below. I believe there will be a 7-inch market, and we should do one. I expressed this to Steve several times since Thanksgiving, and he seemed very receptive the last time.
There you go. Yeah. So that's it. I'm shocked. I'm still shocked. I mean, I'm also happy because this way we will finally see somebody putting up some real competition for the Nexus 7. Aside from all the other Android tablets, which will come out with Jelly Bean in a 7-inch form factor. And it's strange that we're putting it this way because we still don't have a real iPad killer, as in super buttery smooth, super high resolution with the ecosystem to compete with the iPad. But now we're seeing and hearing rumors that there might be an iPad competing with 7-inch Androids.
Yeah, I think that will be the most interesting development in the tablet space.
What do you think would be the price tag on that?
7. What on a 7-inch iPad?
Yeah. What would it need it to be in order for it to be a real competition on the market, in the 7-inch market?
Well, Apple's still going to put a premium on it. Yeah, so I would. What did you say? $350? Yeah, $100 over the other one. $350? Yeah, yep. I'd be with you on that. I wouldn't disagree at all. I think that's exactly what Apple would do. They'd put a $100 premium on it. They justify it by saying, yeah, well, it's an Apple product. It's going to do the job better, and look how many more apps we have, and look, it's aluminum, and whatever it is, and blah, blah, blah.
What if it's plastic? What if it's plastic, no rear camera, super cheap components, $250 just like the Nexus 7?
I think another company would do that. I don't think Apple would. And if they did, people would buy it, but I don't think people would be happy with it.
Well, the initial iPhone had a plastic backing.
No, the initial iPhone had an aluminum one. It was the 3G.
Or the second one. Yeah, the 3G. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and you're right. They took it down. But that was also in line with their design lineage of the time, right, where they had, the MacBook, and they had a lot of plastic products on there. So I think they've gone to metal. I think metal, they really identify with metal. Whatever it is, it's brushed, magnesium. We need to get Jaime on so we can talk about iOS.
Another advantage to metal is it acts as a very, very good heat sink to help dissipate the heat, which makes things run cooler, arguably run faster. Mm-hmm. So I don't see them going away from metal backing at all. Glass isn't quite as good. I think they learned their lesson there, and I think we'll start seeing more metal stuff.
Yeah.
Isn't metal killing the strength of antenna power?
Like reception?
The reception, as in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS.
Yeah, it's definitely
GSM.
Not good for it. I mean, like manufacturers combat that by putting, little rubber windows in there and little plastic cutouts and stuff, and being creative with that. Yeah, it's a good point. I would like to see Apple do something with that polycarbonate. Absolutely. I'm like a polycarbonate super fan over here, but I think that would be really amazing. Not going to happen, you say?
Not going to happen.
No?
How about Kevlar?
Yeah, maybe. So anything ceramic, even if it speaks premium, Apple's all about premium. So I wouldn't be surprised to see ceramic backings.
But wait, you don't think? But polycarbonate, you don't think?
No, polycarbonate is still, and this is my night voice. It's past midnight here, so I'm sorry. I toned it down a little bit. Polycarbonate is still plastic, and plastic still screams cheap. Do you guys remember how we bashed Samsung for the cheap aspect?
Go ahead.
I'll still bash them night and day.
Yeah.
Plastic is cheap, and making silver-colored plastic is tacky.
Completely agree. No, completely agree. But look at, you can't equate Samsung's Galaxy S3 with the HTC One X.
And the Lumias, yeah, right.
Right, because like the One X and the Lumias are beautiful, beautiful hardware to hold in the hand, and they feel different, they look different, they sound different when you drop them. I mean, they're unique and exciting.
Don't drop your phones, Michael. Don't drop them.
Drop test is part of the review, man.
It's not the drop test; it's the sound of the drop test.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, so I think polycarbonate has, the potential to be a very premium material, and I think it's treated as such, and I think people receive it as such. So I don't know. It's unless Samsung is there to coat it in a coating of hyperglaze, in which case, well, then it's just
Brandon
plastic.
would say that it's just slimy and greasy, and it just slips away.
Entirely right. Entirely correct.
Absolutely right.
All right, Jen, we're running low on time, so let's hop into our 2-minute debate corner here. I changed this up, listeners, on the guys about halfway through the podcast because we got Joe talking a little bit about RIM. Initially, I wanted to ask, should RIM have gone with Android? But and Joe, you can talk a little bit about Android in your response if you want, but I'm interested in hearing about this not often discussed possibility. Should RIM earlier, or should they still go with Windows Phone, go with a strategic Microsoft partnership or angle for another angle again for a buyout? Should RIM try to get Windows Phone support? This is a very unlikely scenario, but it's one I'm interested in. And what kind of success do you think they'd meet with? Who wants to go first?
I can go first because I have actually prepared my answer for your initial question, whether RIM should have gone Android. And my answer basically answers your actual current question. So, no, I don't think RIM should have gone Android. I think they should have gone Windows Phone. And I'm going to force a comparison here between Research in Motion and Nokia. They are both excellent hardware manufacturers, and they both had platforms which are dead, Symbian and BlackBerry OS. Well, BlackBerry is not that dead as Symbian, but it's dying slowly. So the reason Nokia didn't go Android is because they wanted to differentiate themselves rather than be just one OEM in the sea of other OEMs running Android platforms. And I think this would have happened with RIM if they went with the Android. They would be probably, how should I say that, humiliated sales-wise by Samsung and HTC, and they would probably start competing with device manufacturers like LG, Huawei, ZTE, and Research in Motion is much more than that. So if there would be a decision, if I would make the decision, I would go Windows Phone because, as with Nokia, it would allow me to show off my hardware with my services on a platform which allows me to be recognized for what I am.
Very nice. Thank you, Tony. Joe? 2 minutes.
Tony, I like everything that you say, but I'm 180 from you. I disagree entirely. Nokia is known for hardware. They've always made good hardware. I've owned Nokia stuff, and I loved it. And I really didn't know or even care about the OS because it was Nokia. When they went Windows Mobile, they were kind of co-branding the Nokia hardware name with the Microsoft Windows Phone. I'm sorry, I said Windows Mobile. I'm still in that era. With the Windows Phone interface, with that look and feel. RIM is not that. RIM makes great hardware, but RIM also had a look and feel that was distinctive, and that I think was even more important than the overall hardware experience that you had with the phone. It did what it did, and it did it well, and that wasn't just hardware, that was software. So by picking up Android and even just using that as the background OS with their own custom whatever on top of it, where you couldn't even get to Android, you didn't have the same marketplace, you didn't have the same anything, it was just the guts of it. I think they could have then not only kept the same look and feel that they'd already established that their users were used to, but they also could have appealed to the enterprise customer. That's who I think really is the core customer for RIM, is people who really don't have a choice because your company says, here's your phone, have a nice day, because it talks so well to the enterprise, to the security, to administration, to just deploying and having it work. So RIM, I don't think they could have done Windows Mobile or Windows Phone rather. It would have just been, it would have been giving up.
10 seconds, Joe.
That's it. It would have been given up.
Wow.
I have a
jeez.
question for you, Michael.
Yeah, hit me. Well, that was great timing there, Joe. Man, you know how to do that 2 minutes.
I think he has a timer.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I didn't. That was just Joe the Android guy at his finest.
Wow. Top notch. What's your question, Tony? Hit me.
So I'm sure many will agree with me when I'll say that some of BlackBerry devices resemble very much with the Palm HP devices. Michael, what would you think if RIM would go Open WebOS?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, and it's one that I think was relevant a little while ago when HP put WebOS up for sale, and I think RIM was rumored as one of the potential suitors even back then, or it was probably a baseless. But RIM hardware is absolutely beautiful, as has been mentioned, or it was. Some of it was in its time. Its keyboards are unparalleled, and Palm has always been a huge keyboard fanatic. I think if you took only the best part of each, of RIM and what Palm had with WebOS, something compelling might have emerged, but I just don't trust RIM that much in its current state or in its past state to handle it. Anything, of course, would have been better than HP, but would I have liked to have seen devices like that? Yes. I don't think RIM would have built them. I think they would have stripped WebOS for parts and made it, fail even harder than it did. But if RIM adopted Open WebOS, I would love to see that, and I would buy 5 such devices. Of course, that answer is based on the fact that currently there's no guarantee that any official hardware, will be released running Open WebOS. But no, really, that's a very good question, Tony, and I maybe we'll see that. I hope.
Who knows?
I think that'll make a viable third option for us.
Mm-hmm.
God, I think it would be beautiful.
Yeah.
That'd be
let's just hope
fourth option.
A fourth.
Let's just hope they won't go, I don't know, BADA or something like that.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope they stick around. Cool. Well, there was a miscellaneous piece which we're going to skip this week. We have one piece of listener mail before we wrap it up, and I really love listener mail. So listeners, actually we all do. Please stick around till the end of the podcast so you can listen to how to send that in. This comes to us from McKinley, aka Ubi 2447.
If I recall well, is also not only a reader but also an avid commenter on our website.
I believe so as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to refer to you as McKinley Ubi because it's just easier in the podcast. But it's really great to hear from you, and he's got a great question. He says, I just watched number 004. Noticed I added the zeros, and I wanted to offer a question to you in regard to the Motorola Razr HD.
The biscuit phone.
Yeah, the biscuit postage stamp phone. My question is, do you think that even with the formidable release of the S3, the Galaxy S3, Moto has done a disservice to the device by giving it a release date of even a month from now? I ask this because I feel that it's been somewhat of a standard to see their top-tier devices with 720p displays, specifically dual-core S4 processors, 1 gig of RAM, etc., with not much variation on that model. So I think the question here is do we think
What's the question?
do we think that Motorola is doing the device a disservice by holding it? Like, I mean, should they push it out the door right now? Is how I'm reading this. Do you guys read it the same way?
Well, yeah, from what I understood, and I think this has been answered in this podcast and my previous rants, that it's lame, regardless of who's doing it, to announce something today and to push it on the market 3 or 4 months away, or even 2 months away. So I think whenever you are ready to show something off to the world, better be ready to have it in less than 30 days on the shelves. I'm not talking carriers here, because even though it could be possible, discussing it with carriers beforehand is possible. But as far as global versions are concerned, there are no carrier tie-ups. So just have it ready to be on the market 1 month from the announcement, and that should be a decent amount of time.
What do you think, Joe? You think Motorola should hold this or release it unfinished?
I'll take a little bit of a different stance. We just went through the whole Nexus Q I don't want to call that a debacle, but it was interesting, wasn't it? We heard about a device, and they released it a month from now, from when they released it, and people have got it, and it's not what they wanted. It looked cool. We had a lot of buzz about it, but it wasn't what they wanted. So by Motorola announcing this and kind of getting it out there, I think they're gauging their, essentially their market share, their interest. They're seeing if it's really a viable product, if they really should do it before they go and push it out on everybody, because nobody wants something that's pushed out and half-baked or won't compete.
True.
So I think they're doing a service to everybody, and the end users who really want it are going to get a better device because of it.
But this begs a question, if I may.
Yeah.
Joe, let's say you are an excellent cook, chef. Would you put in front of me on the table a half-baked meal? I mean, and to put it in a specific context, why show something off if it's not finished, if it's not ready for prime time?
Other than just to gauge interest and see if it's what your customers want, that's the only viable reason.
Well,
I see your point. I agree with it entirely, but I still think that the analogy with food may not be entirely true, because people can change on a dime and release hardware with different specs right away. It's getting the right specs. That's what's more important.
Not to mention, I think the analogy is that, like, if there's food being advertised to you, like you're promised food at one table in your dining room, and whoever's cooking is like, yeah, just a few more minutes. Look, here's a picture of what I'm making you. That's fine. But what if right out the window there's a fast food restaurant whose chimney is just like blowing smoke right through your kitchen, and it's like, God, that smells amazing, because that's what the market is. It's not just standalone manufacturers. It's everyone else is being like, hey, I mean, yeah, you could buy what they've got right now, but look what we've got coming in 4 months. Maybe you hold off for a second.
Well, I think it's consumer psychology. I want to keep this short because I know we're short on time, but I personally, as far as I'm concerned, it always backfires on me. I love the Nokia 808 PureView. I held it in my hands in Barcelona in February. Can you believe it that only now it gets on the shelves here in Europe? I mean, come on. I'm no longer interested in that phone because meanwhile we have the Galaxy S3, we have some new products which will come up, and you know what? Whatever you showed me 4 months ago, I'm no longer interested, even if you put a quad-core processor in.
Yeah, hypothetical, fictitious, Tony, that may be true for, but I mean, you're in love with that PureView even though you had to wait 6 months for it. So, I feel like Nokia, it worked. Like, they seduced you, and they were like, look what's going to be ready. Look what's coming down the pipe. And you're like, whatever, I'm tired of waiting. And then it comes to your door, and you're like, yeah, this is the phone I want.
Not everybody had the opportunity to hold it in their hands in Barcelona.
Oh,
so if I was to only judge it by the ads and by the specs, I would have probably said, nah, you know what, keep it.
True, that's a good point.
So can we agree that there's a line there between companies wanting to get out their information, say, here it is, this is what's coming, and being able to get that in our hands versus having just too much time pass, and then it becomes more frustrating or irrelevant?
I can only say this, and this is one of the reasons I respect Apple. Apple's keywords at every keynote are, quote, available
today. Yep.
And I've said everything.
Yep. No, it's very true. And we've actually stumbled into the second half of McKinley's question. Do you feel like this is he's just not sure that cool looks, a large 2,500 milliamp hour battery and a high megapixel camera are enough to keep me from waiting the few more months for Google's new Nexi or one of those new super devices. I like the word Nexi, by the way. We keep getting whispers about. Yeah, there's always going to be something hot right around the corner. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be something new coming down the pipe, especially in mobile technology. And honestly, I think you have to jump on what looks compelling to you. Nexus products are awesome in the Android world, but honestly, I haven't been recommending a Nexus phone to people who ask me what Android they should get by and large, because when I ask them questions, it turns out that their needs are met by a phone that's not a Nexus phone, like the Galaxy S3 or like the One X or whatever. Skin be damned. So I think that you need to wait. Personally, this is me, McKinley, Michael. You need to wait until the device drops. You need to hold it in your hand, read a couple reviews, get a feel for the software, and then make the decision then. Because if you're constantly looking into the future and seeing what's coming next, you're never going to be able to buy anything.
And if possible, just go the European way and don't buy on contract.
Right.
If you can afford it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Absolutely. And honestly, end of the day, that's what Pocketnow is here for. We're going to tell you what's new and what's coming down the pike, but we're also going to tell you this is what is available now. We're going to let you know after the buzz if it's still worth it after it's not shiny and new anymore, so that you know if this is something that you should put your money into or if you should wait for the next round to come around.
Agreed. That is a solid button right there, Joe. Thank you.
Make a T-shirt out of that one.
Well, with that, guys, I'm sure that it has been an excellent podcast. I kind of want to wrap it up here. It has been awesome having you on the show, Joe. Thank you for joining us.
I'm glad I could make it. Thank you.
Me too. I'm glad we could fulfill the desires of some commenters and readers, and probably a lot more than actually commented. So. We're looking forward to having you back again very soon, since you have a new mic and you sound great.
It's brand new, shiny today.
You should do an after the buzz.
Yeah.
When it's not shiny and new anymore.
Exactly. The Logitech face mic.
Now at Pocketnow.
Pocket this.
Oh, that would be a cool name for a thing. All right, we got to go. Tony. Anything before we wrap up here?
I think we're already too long, too many words today, so I'm going to skip this one and hand it over to Joe because he's the special guest.
Sounds good. What are you handing it over to Joe for? I'm confused.
Closing thoughts.
Oh, closing thoughts. Yes. Joe, do you have any?
It is the wrap-up section. I just wanted to say thanks for having me on. I want to do this more often, obviously. I think it's great, especially meeting with you guys. To our listeners and to our readers, you're going to read something from us on Pocketnow, and I want everybody to know that just because one editor says something doesn't mean that that's the only opinion that we have here. And I think that's one of the great things about the podcast is we get so many different opinions and different perspectives. I mean, can you imagine you're hearing opinions about BlackBerry from an Android guy or from iOS. The crossover is what's there, and that's what makes it great. And that's where I like having everybody follow us on Twitter and on Google Plus, so that you can get some of that participation. Because once the article's posted, we don't leave it alone. Tony's commented lots of times on my articles. You have too, Michael. So we try and add that on the articles. The podcast just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah,
agreed. Well, that is solid, and that
let's
wraps
wrap up the wrap up.
Yep, that's right. That's it, listeners. Thank you for listening. This has been episode 005 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Feel free to throw a tweet our way. Most of us are pretty active in the Twitter sphere, as Joe just mentioned. When he's here, Brandon Miniman is at Brandon Miniman. Tony over there is at Anton D. Nagy. Damn it!
Spell that, please.
I'm gonna
spell that by
it.
letters.
ANTONDNAGY. And following that pattern, Joe Levi, the Android guy, is at Joe Levi. I was late to the Twitter game, so my handle is not my name. You can find me at Captain2Phones. That's Captain, the number 2 phones. You can follow Pocketnow's official Twitter account at PocketNowTweets. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/PocketNow. On Google Plus at gplus.to/Pocketnow, or just search for Pocketnow, which is probably easier. Please leave us a review on iTunes or Zune if you like the podcast. And finally, if you have a topic, question, suggestion for the podcast, or just want to say hi, leave us an email at podcast@pocketnow.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
See you later.